We are going to be talking about classroom management today. I really love this talking about classroom management because I often hear people who ask me to come and speak, like I teach too, classroom management and differentiated instruction. And oftentimes people always say differentiated instruction, right? Because they want to learn like the cool and different ways to be able to engage students and how to teach different learning styles. But I always tell faculty or anyone else or administrators that come to me about that request first, I say, you got to learn classroom management before you get to differentiated instruction, because you're going to waste your time with all these cool different ways to engage your students because they're not going to be listening, they're not going to be showing up, they're going to be participating in these low-level behaviors that disrupt the rest of the class, and then no one's going to be listening. So the foundation of differentiated instruction and everything else that you guys do in the classroom is making sure you have respect and order, and that way you're able to deliver the message in the way that you want. So I'm sure that all of you that have experienced probably when you're in a face-to-face class, like the consistent lateness or, texting on their phone or having their laptops off and chatting with other people, which are, distracting the other students in the classroom. And all those things really take away from the time that we have in the classroom. But now that we're in an online setting, we're going to have a lot more discussion about, what's different and what are some of the issues that we have going on in this setting, which makes it a little bit. Okay? So before we get started, would anyone like to share about what kind of low-level behaviors they're dealing with in an online setting, like maybe just not listening, not following directions, like consistently having to email the same things out multiple times when you've already repeated it? What are you guys seeing in this e-learning environment that's different for you? Gretchen?
Yeah, you actually hit on it. It's the repeating multiple times.
Yes. Is there anything in particular is there anything in particular that you're continuously having to repeat?
Yeah, like if I give an assignment, because Kelvin and I do blended classes where we're on campus and as well as ERL. Okay. And so if I have students, and it's usually they're on campus on Wednesday or Thursday, and if I give an assignment, then for them to have prepared and ready for our virtual class, which is on Monday or Tuesday, it's like all weekend long, I'm getting emails from students like, what did you say? And it's in the thing is that I also announcements. So they're not listening in class, but they're also not going to their Blackboard announcements to see what the assignments are.
Yes, exactly. And I see the exact same thing too. Like you've explained it, you've posted it on the announcements, you've probably put it out in an email. I'm sure it's on the syllabus too in your lesson plan, and yet you're still getting bombarded with questions, that of which you've already said multiple times. Okay. What about you, Calvin? What are you seeing in the classroom right now?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I don't know. Sometimes students would tell me, "Oh, I didn't look at that," or "I wasn't paying attention." I said, "Well, thanks for being honest." But because when you have multiple, let's say if you have 25 students in the class, and of the 25 students, at least 2 or 3 throughout each class will ask you to repeat something, right, that you said before. So it can be frustrating. I'm pretty hard, especially beginning of the semester, because I want to let them know I'm trying to hold them accountable, and especially they transition from high school to college. They're looking for the instructor Calvin to hold their hand, maybe like their high school student, a high school professor did, instructor did. So I'm trying to kind of wean them off of that process. So early on, I'm very strict. As semester moves along, I may be more lenient, but it can be frustrating at times. And what I do now, every class I repeat something I said last class, and I do it again. And then I find myself, spending a lot of time on that subject matter. And then I show them where it's at. Good thing about online is that I can actually show them where it's located in Blackboard. And I still see of the 20 students, 2 students still don't know where it's at, So it can be frustrating at times. It can be.
Absolutely. Of course it can be. And for a lot of teachers, what I've been finding is that they're actually spending more time on these low-level behaviors in an e-learning environment than they were even in the classroom, because right there you can address it in the moment, say something quickly. Yes, but when you're like reading these emails and having to respond to each person and explain, like, I already told you this and all this kind of stuff, I mean, it's like double the amount of time, and sometimes even triple, that we're spending on these low-level behaviors. Okay, well, thank you guys for sharing. Just real quick, are you guys able to see my screen right now? Like I just switched over to a document. Can you see that?
See the
Okay.
slide, the PowerPoint
You
slide?
see this? You don't see a Word document right now that says charting cheat sheet?
Oh, no, I don't see that.
Okay, no problem. I'm just trying to figure out how to be able to share my screen because I wanted to show you some tools I've been using that's been effective in this. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the main things that we're going to cover today that a lot of teachers probably want the most help with is when it comes to the repeated warnings, right? Consistently saying the same thing, like right here, that's draining your energy. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we can reduce saying the same things multiple times and saying it to a bunch of different students so that way you can get that time back in the classroom. We're also going to be talking about teaching to expectations and the importance of unconditional positive regard, which is where we talk to our students as if they're good people with good intentions that may at times make some mistakes, where we don't attack their character and we don't get into an argument, where we can be able to earn their respect, where we're still being firm, but we have a positive culture in our class, okay? And then we're also finally going to be talking about self-control, like what do we do when that same student has emailed us 4 or 5 different times asking the same thing that we've already put out in 15 different places in emails in the syllabus, and they're continuing not to do that and then asking for even more help. Okay, so we're going to try to figure out different ways where we can maneuver around that so you can get what you want on the first time that you have it. Okay, so one thing that I really like this line, they always talk about this in classroom management, is about students not knowing how much, they don't really care how much you know. They want to know that you actually care about them. So this is really foundational to the concept of unconditional positive regard, that oftentimes we may, because we get frustrated with their behaviors, they may see us as just people who are disciplining them and always pointing out to them when they're doing something wrong, that we don't actually care about their feelings or their life or their struggles or what they're going with, that we just only care about the results in the classroom, and if they're not performing at our expectations, then they're like not worthy, So, I always talk about this particular line because I think it's really important that we consistently show our students compassion and care, even at times when their behavior is very frustrating. Okay? So, just the objectives today, we're just going to talk about how different classroom management, how these low-level behaviors suck up time in the classroom. We're going to talk about how to be able to build these relationships, have kindness in the classroom where they feel like they're being regarded as good people with good intentions. And most importantly is what a lot of teachers want to know, how can I give one request and get what I want majority of the time? Okay, and that's the important thing because that's related to consistency and consistently following through right away when someone doesn't do what they've been asked or they've been told the expectation is. Okay, so just to put it out there, how much time do you guys think the average K through 12 educator spends on low-level discipline challenges per week? Okay, so think about K through 12 per week. You have full class day, so maybe what, 7:30 in the morning until 3. How many hours in a week are they spending on, don't do this, put your phone away, stop talking, you're late, disrupting? Any ideas?
Well, I know a couple, and they say that it's almost half of the day sometimes they spend on it. So by the end of the week, they're fried in a completely different way than I am.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, half the time, that's a lot, and I'm sure it'll depend on, what school they're at and what's going on there, but I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
What about you, Calvin? What do you think? How much time?
I'm thinking about 10 hours, maybe
Okay.
1 hour and a half per day.
Okay. That's really impressive that you guys said that because it is about 5 to 9 hours per week. And if you think about it, in an 8-hour day or 7-hour day, that's like almost an entire day. So basically, if this is an average of 5 to 9, I mean, if it's like, 9 hours, I mean, you're basically teaching only 4 days out of the week. And the rest of the days you're just reprimanding, right? You're just saying, don't do this, stop doing this, everything, you know what I mean? And it's a circular pattern of dysfunction that is just really frustrating for teachers, which is when it turns into this, like, sometimes I just don't care anymore. Like I just kind of throw my hands up and I'm just, it is what it is. Or we just kind of accept things and we say, there's nothing I can do, so I'm just going to stop trying. Okay. So we're going to talk first about unconditional positive regard. And I really love this because I'm a therapist. I own my own private practice. And this is the foundation of the humanistic therapy, which is by Carl Rogers, where we talk to people in a compassionate and caring way. Like if my client comes to me and says, I just got out of jail for murder, or I've killed somebody in the past, or I robbed a bank when I was a teenager. We treat that the exact same way as any other issue, that they're good people with good intentions and that they deserve the same care and compassion as anyone else, that we don't hold them as bad people and define people by their actions. Okay, so I really love when they did this training and I got certified in this, that they talked about how important it is to actually care about people and who they are. Okay, so the whole concept of unconditional positive regard is about humans being first and humans doing second, basically who they are as people first and their behavior comes secondary, that we don't define people by their actions. Okay, and you know, the foundation of the practice I own says this right there on the front page of the website. It says you are not defined by one moment, by one action of anything, like, and you're not even defined by a series of actions. Okay, we don't define you by, you know, certain actions. You are more than that, but there's more to your character. For positive relationships to happen in the classroom, we actually have to work at it. We have to be able to build relationships with our students where we don't have what we call just contingent interactions. Contingent interactions where we're only talking to our students about their work. Did they get their work done? Did they have enough time on the test? Did they read the expectations that were on there? That we have non-contingent interactions, which is, hey, how are things going for you? How are you handling the stress? I remember that you said that you were going to be late to class because you had an interview. How did that go? Okay, so sometimes I think a lot of times in an e-learning environment, we've gotten a little bit away from that. Instead of just shooting our student maybe a quick message being like, oh yeah, I remember you saying that, or I remember you were saying that your dad was sick. How did that go? Like, you need someone to talk to because I'm happy to refer you to somebody. Okay, so these are like the things that we want to bring back to the classroom where we're not just having contingent interactions, which is only about their work, what they've produced, and what they could be doing better. That we talk about things besides that, because I've noticed that you can learn a lot about your students during this time. Like at the beginning of class, when we're kind of like a lot of my students log on early, we just talk and we don't talk about anything related to school. Every question that I ask them is like, oh, like, how was your day? What did you do? Like, oh, I see that's your dog in the background. What kind of dog do you have? Like, you know what I mean? Just different things where they get to realize that you're a person, they're a person, and that this relationship isn't only built on their homework and what they produce and what their answers are. So I'm going to put it out to you guys right now, Gretchen, Calvin, anyone else who maybe has joined. What kind of non-contingent interactions do you have with your students? Go ahead, Calvin.
What I started doing is I got from another colleague a couple weeks ago. At the beginning of each class, especially beginning of the week, I asked them to type online one word to describe their weekend, this past weekend. And so they'll say, like somebody said, they said engaging. What you do engaging? They said they gave a relative a birthday party, had a wonderful time. I probably would not normally have gotten that information. So it allows me to talk about something outside of the subject matter. Also, I can take attendance during that time period. So I'm starting to see more information, being able to have dialogue with them while I am online with them, which is different. I wasn't doing that before.
Okay, awesome, Calvin. Thanks for sharing that. I might actually take that idea and try that myself next class. Maybe just ask them one word. I really like that. Thank you for sharing. Gretchen, what about you? Monroe?
Yes. Yes, I'm having the students work on COVID-19. We're having breakout sessions. I have them talk about COVID-19. How are things going with you? How is everything going? So they're working on it. So they're excited about what we're working on in the classroom. Yes, and these are research.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, and I'm glad that you keep an open forum for people to talk about this because it's stressful for them, right? So you're creating an environment where they can just talk about some of the stresses related to COVID-19.
I'm back.
Okay, go ahead, Gretchen.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. What I do is I've got two classes that are back to back, so I open my class 15 minutes, just what you were saying, 15 minutes prior to class to just chat with my students about whatever. And then at the end, my last class, I keep it open for anybody who wants to talk. So like today, one of my students, he wanted to talk because his wife we were talking about COVID actually, and his wife is a nurse, and he was, we just sat and talked for about 10 minutes after class about his wife and what she was doing and everything, and he prompted me, but I leave it open for them to know that, hey, if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything with class or outside of class, I'm here for you, and it helps build that relationship, I think.
Definitely. And I think that's great. I mean, I'm glad that you're able to be there to support your student and be able to talk about things that are going on in their life. I would encourage all of you to do this even every class. Like one thing that we've started at the beginning of class, and I email it to the class, is the 15 minutes before. I always say what we're doing for anyone that comes on early the day before. So I'm like, hey, everyone, bring your favorite music video. We're going to watch one video before class in the first 15 minutes, or tonight it's pizza night, so make sure to have pizza ready, and we're going to eat pizza together before class starts, right? And then we just kind of hang out and talk, and I found like there's two things that happen out here. One, all the students come early and they don't get any credit for being early. They're just coming because it's fun and they want to be able to hang out and socialize. And number two, I don't really have to deal with lateness anymore because they're already there coming early because they want to hang out and do whatever it was that was emailed to them that we're doing earlier that day before we start class. So that way they can get their talking out, and once class starts, we get focused. Okay? And I would say like this has been a really great way for me to connect with my students, because online has always been very difficult for me. Like I'm a therapist, I see my clients face to face, so the whole virtual thing has been a struggle for me. So I've had to go out of my way to be able to say, what can I do to not just make them feel comfortable, but for me to be comfortable, so that way I can be my best self when I show up for them. Okay, so sometimes we just have to be able to do things like that, and it can just be really fun. And also when they have that relationship with you, they're much more likely to be able to listen, accept feedback, get things done in time, because they have that respect already. Okay, so that way when they don't do something, they own it, they apologize, rather than not having a relationship with me and having just me being the person that emails them their homework once a week and tells them what they need to be doing. All right, thank you guys for sharing. So secondly, the thing about it is clear expectations, okay? And I want to talk about this because this is really important, because this is what's going to get you away from a lot of these repeated requests, which is going to be coming up next, okay? A lot of times, I found in an e-learning environment, we do make it pretty specific, right? We're like, this is where it happens. You need to be in class at this time. We have it on the syllabus that shows your the lesson plan and all this kind of stuff, so just read it, okay? So I've noticed that a lot of teachers were just saying all the information is on the lesson plan. Okay, so I've really gotten away from that, especially in this e-learning environment, to be more specific. Okay, for example, in the classroom, saying you need to be paying attention when class starts, that's super vague. Okay, when the way I give directions, we need to be in class, 9 o'clock, our phones, laptops put away, pen and paper ready for the in-class assignment, and full attention ready to learn. Okay, that's much clearer than something vague, and I've noticed a lot of times our students need very clear expectations. Monroe, do you have something to share, because your hand's still raised?
No, I don't.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that I wasn't cutting you off. Okay, so in the way that I've done for clear expectations here in an online environment, I was trying to share my screen actually earlier to show you some of the things that I do, but I have made cheat sheets, and then I will post it in the learning environment in Blackboard, and they can always go there if they, like, say they log into Collaborate, and we happen to be on Zoom because maybe Collaborate wasn't working, but they didn't check their email. On the cheat sheet it says, if you go to Collaborate and I'm not there, go to Zoom, here's the link. Okay, if this happens, do this. If you don't know when it's due, here is where you're going to go. So there's a cheat sheet that has everything laid out, and that's in Blackboard in the course material section, and everything that's in there is also on the announcement. Okay, and then every Sunday night before the next week starts, I copy and paste very quickly just from the syllabus everything that they need to do, like for the week, and that email goes out on Sunday. So there should be no excuses for somebody not knowing what needs to be done. Okay, and then for those who come in the classroom, like who are there during when we do face-to-face sessions, then we talk about it at the very end. I've noticed that the more places that I do this, the more likely that the students know what the expectations are, because the first time I tried to do this in March, I wasn't clear, and I was getting a lot of students not knowing what they needed to do, not knowing when something was due, not knowing to look on the lesson plan because they were used to coming in class and hearing me tell it to them. And then I found myself wasting a ton of time and trying to figure out, what do I need to do differently? So one is a cheat sheet. 2, everything's on the cheat sheet is also in the announcements. And then 3, every Sunday, I send a very quick email. I just want to wish that I hope everyone had a really awesome weekend. I know that you already know this because it's on the syllabus, but here are the assignments for the week. And this is what we're doing, right? Real quick. And then I've learned to be able to eliminate a lot of these repeated requests because I'm being very clear. My question to you guys right now is, what could you be doing differently in your class or in the way you deliver a message that would be more clear for your students to understand the expectations?
For me, that I have already started something, and where I do is in the beginning of class, I do, like you have your slide here, and I will go 1, 2, 3, 4, what we're doing for the day, and then I'll be like, first 10 minutes, because my students bounce around. They have videos, lectures, me, chat. We're like doing all kinds of stuff during class. So I used to just put up in the slide in the spring, you know, this is what we're doing today. And then I found out they're like, well, where do we go first? Or what do we do? Or what folder is that in? Because I have this really voluminous Blackboard thing. So I found just doing that simple 1, 2, 3, 4. And I have to be super flexible because I have 5 classes, but I usually have 3 in a row on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So if someone in the first class asks a question, I have to right away go back and I change it on the slide so that it's clear for the next class. So flexibility is becoming my big thing, but it seems to really work good for me.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Is there anybody else that thinks that maybe they could be doing something differently to maybe be a little bit more specific about what needs to be done so that way the students are clear on what the expectations are? Monroe?
Yes, well, I found that I had to be very specific. After the beginning, when we first started and online, then later on I said, well, what can I do and be very specific? Because I got a lot of questions like you where do I find this? What do we need to do, and so forth. But I was clearer, and it made it easier for me. So just echoing what you said, that you definitely need to be specific. And I use cheat sheets, so that's worked out well for me. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those cheat sheets, I think they're really helpful. Like I was saying, I have my own practice, right? So when I want to disseminate information, I do multiple different things. Like, for example, when I was training my staff on insurance coding, right? Because we're billing insurance for the therapy sessions that we do. First, we had multiple things. We did a Zoom session, and everyone was there during that session, okay? I'm not going to have a meeting where one person can't come and then I'm having to repeat myself multiple times because I'm trying to get my time back. If I'm going to waste time that way, it defeats the purpose. In addition, that Zoom session was being recorded. And it was all sent out to every person so that way they had it. Secondly, I did a cheat sheet that was on our shared drive. So anything that they may have missed, if they don't want to go back and watch the video, it clearly outlined where the codes are, what they need to do, how they need to use them, and everything else like that. So that way, the expectations are clear. If there is a mistake, I refer them back to the material, okay? This is really important because if you don't do that, you're going to get into this back and forth argument with your student or a discussion that is wasteful, right? Because when you're defending your position or even saying, I already told you this, I already put it there, we already went over it, that's all wasting time. That's included in that 5 to 9 hours that we were talking about earlier. So me taking time to put the cheat sheet on in the drive, then I say the power struggle is not between me and my staff, it's between the staff member and the cheat sheet that I put up, okay? So I remove myself from that power struggle, and then it helps not disrupt the relationship between me and my staff member, right? Because I'm not saying, hey, you're not listening to me, or I'm personalizing it, or it hurts my feelings because you're not paying attention or you're wasting time. It's really like, you know, they have to figure it out between them and the material that they said that they understand. Okay, so that's one thing I would encourage you guys to start doing. The more resources that you have for your students to use, the less of a power struggle it's going to be between you and the student. All right, here is the big one that a lot of people like ask about all the time. How do I get away from the multiple requests? Okay, the reason why we don't start with this is because it's an all-encompassing model. Okay, The first thing is you have to have a good relationship with your students where you have unconditional positive regard. You're treating them as good people with good intentions. You're showing care and compassion. You're showing that you care about something other than just the material that they produce. Okay? Secondly, you have been very clear up until this point. You're not giving vague things and vague directions, which leaves room for a ton of questions. And thirdly is when we start talking about one request. A lot of people just like to jump to this, but they don't even have the relationship with their students to be able to deliver this, which is why it doesn't work. Okay? So all those things need to first happen, and then we can go to one request where you should be able to get what you want on the first time you request it 90% of the time. Okay? You shouldn't have to repeat yourself more than one time. Any time that you do that, that is a choice that you are making. Okay? You provide a request. If it's not followed, there should be an immediate consequence. Okay? A lot of times you may have to play around what that looks like. So basically what I tell my students is, and I put this in an email and I talk about it in class, and they all know the expectations, that if I have disseminated information that has been clear and that they say they've understood, that is in multiple places, which everything is in the announcements, course material sections, and then reiterated in an email. Okay? And I always do it in 3 different places because one student will always be like, oh, well, I don't have access to my Triton email. I don't have access to this and this and this. Like there's always something, right? So it doesn't matter if you don't have access to the email, you have it in the assignments, in the announcement. And if you haven't checked the announcements because you weren't paying attention, it is in the course material sections where you should be going for all the material, final exams, PowerPoints, everything else like that. So if you haven't seen it there, that means you're not doing any work in the class. If my students come to me and they ask me a question that I've already talked about, I will answer the question, but they will automatically lose 10 points towards their participation grade. Okay? And I follow this every single time. Okay? Because I ask, there's only one request. The second time, there is an immediate consequence. Okay? So I usually have an issue probably about the first week in class, and then once the points start coming off, they lose. Okay? They stop it, they lose the points, they get discouraged, and they don't do it anymore. They start checking their work and they start fixing it. This is all outlined in my syllabus. So I give participation points, which means if they show up to class on time, they're engaging, they're doing everything they need to be, they also get points for that as well. So I'm not just consequencing them, I'm also giving them a reward when they do the right thing. At the end of the semester, anyone who has not asked a question that was already repeated or wasted any of my time with, I don't know where something is, even though I've shown it to you in 50 million different places, gets 10 extra credit points at the end of the semester. Okay? The reason for that is because I'm praising positive behavior and I'm consequencing poor behavior, okay? Which is one of the foundations of classroom management. A lot of times faculty will say, well, I shouldn't have to do that. This is in college and this is that, and they should be adults. This is real life too. When my staff members are performing at an incredibly high rate, which they do, they're amazing therapists, they review work, they minimize errors, guess what? They get raises, they get things. I buy them lunch and I do things like that. So it's not just that we're treating people like kids, this is life. When you perform well at your job, a lot of times you get moved up the ladder, you're being considered for leadership positions, you get raises. So there's no need for that to be any different than in the classroom. We can do the same thing because this is real life. Okay, so I just want to put that out there just so you guys know that, and I just want to see what you guys think about it. Losing points for asking questions, which results in wasting time because they're not following directions, and then getting points when they do follow direction. What do you guys think about that?
That's different, but I will take a look at that. What about startup versus shutdown? Did you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I'll give an example of that we deal with in the classroom. So say somebody is sitting there tapping their pencil like nonstop, and you go and you say, stop tapping your pencil, it's disruptive. That's a shutdown, okay? A way to say start up is we need quiet hands, okay? So when my students have their phones out and the expectation is that their phones, laptops, and everything is put away, like when we're in a classroom setting, I don't say, put your phone away. I've told you a million times that you can't have your phone out and your laptop needs to be put away. I say, we need clean desks, because usually their laptop is on the desk, and they know right away that that means they need to close their laptop and put it away. Okay? Instead of saying, you do this or you're doing something wrong, I'm saying, first of all, I'm saying we, and then I say, we need clean desks, which means it needs to be emptied and they know that they can put it away, okay? So in an e-learning environment, it's a little bit different. Okay, I can say something like, we need to make sure that we're just understanding the material, the direction, so that way I can spend more time on making more positive and engaging material for you, and less time having to have these email conversations back and forth. That's a startup instead of a shutdown, where I would be like, I told you this, it's in the announcements, it's in the course material section. You are not taking the time to read the directions, and I'm not going to keep doing this with you. Okay? You have to realize that both of those deliveries are accurate, right? And because both of them are true, right? I mean, you probably have said it in a bunch of different ways, but how you're delivering this when somebody isn't following the direction is extremely important. That you're saying it in a compassionate way, and that we're not just attacking them, because it's very easy for us to jump to that shutdown place where a student will feel shameful about their behavior, and then feel like, they'll kind of like cower out and then not want to really participate because they've been, maybe put on blast or, embarrassed in front of the whole class. Does that make sense, Calvin, the difference between a startup and a shutdown?
Oh, yes. I like that starting with we. That's always good. When you start saying we need this, we need that. So
yes. Yeah. And I say that all the time. I say that with my staff here very consistently. I say, we need to make sure that we're showing our students care and compassion. We need to be able to make sure that we keep our desk clean and everything, because we give people tours and they want to know that they're in a safe, clean environment. Or we need to make sure that we're taking temperature checks outside. If someone forgets to take temperature check, or someone doesn't have their mask on, we need to make sure that we're promoting safe behaviors by leading by example. Okay? I never say you. It's always we. And the thing about saying we is that you're including yourself as somebody who is able to, and who is someone that makes a mistake. You're not saying that we're on a power trip and you're the one doing this and I'm perfect. Okay? We're saying we just need to make sure that we're doing this. And one thing, I would encourage you guys to do is, when you make a mistake, to own it. Totally own it. Like, just actually 3 weeks ago, I got sucked into a little bit of a back and forth. Okay, even though I teach this, I'm not going to pretend like I'm perfect. I make mistakes, and I kind of got into this back and forth, tit for tat. And in the middle of it, I kind of caught myself, and I was like, I'm disengaging from this, right? And then the next day, I actually reached out to the student. I said, you know what? I really could have handled this differently. What I should have done is I should have been more compassionate. I should have listened to your stance more, where you were coming from, and I could have delivered it in a different way. I apologize, and I'm going to work on doing this differently next time. And now this student and I have like a great relationship, because one thing that she said in that moment after I apologized is that she's never actually had a teacher apologize and hold themselves accountable for anything. Okay? If we make a mistake, own it. I do that with my staff here all the time. If I didn't handle something well with the client, that's the first thing I share about when we have group supervision on Friday. Hey guys, look at this situation that I could have handled differently. And let me tell you what was going on with me during that time and what I'm going to do differently. And this leaves an open forum for people to share more about maybe their struggles with clients, and not feel like they can't share if they don't know how to handle a certain crisis with a client, or they don't want to tell me because they're afraid that I'll look at them and be like, oh, well, you're a licensed therapist. You should know how to do that, right? So any opportunity that we have to be able to share a safe and supportive environment is an opportunity that I would definitely encourage all of you. So the question, I wanted to put it out there, and I really want to hear like what's happening in the classroom. When your students don't do what they need to do, like, Calvin, Gretchen, you guys were sharing at the beginning that you're having to tell them the same thing multiple times over the weekend, they're blowing you up with emails. How do you respond in those moments?
What I do is that when I get an email, I would start off saying students. I would say students were requested to adhere to the rubrics for such and such assignment. So I always generalize it without saying you per se. And I do the same thing like online. If a student asks me something about the syllabus, and I said, "You see the syllabus?" She said, "No, I didn't see it." So I said, "Let's look at it together." So now I'm literally taking the whole class to where the syllabus is located. So I try to generalize things more so than actually saying you or why didn't you do this. I try to be in a positive manner to do that, and most likely that student wouldn't ask me the same thing, but another student may ask me the same thing because they probably seen or heard how I responded to the other student request. I think the students know that you're not going to bust them out, be negative toward them. they may be willing to ask you something that you already said before. Because I try not to come across as negative as I really really feel about it.
Right. Exactly. And I love that you shared that, Calvin, because those ways of delivering it in that harsh kind of maybe critical way is my nature to do that. So I constantly have to work on it to not do that. Right? Like I was in the military for years, so that making mistakes, sloppiness, asking the same thing multiple times, that's not going to work. Like we would have gotten our butts kicked if we tried to do that. And if I mean, we would be sitting in a push-up position all day if you weren't listening and performing at the level that these students were. And sometimes I want to say that, like, maybe you should go in the military and get your butt kicked, because I bet you wouldn't be making these sloppy mistakes that you're making right now. So that's actually me, and everything that I do when I'm teaching you guys is me practicing not to be like me, basically.
But
So I hear
it's
where you're
hard.
coming
I'm the same way. Coming from my business background, I taught adjunct, which is at night, for about 12 years. So when I came on board as a full-time daytime, it was a culture shock for me. It was, I mean,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, what just happened? And I couldn't believe
Right.
it. So I had to change my perspective in order to, back to that one slide saying, students or people don't care how much you know to know what you care. So I had to really show my students, this is during the daytime, show them, especially, well, let me give you an example. I had a student come to me the first semester. It was like a 11 o'clock class. She came to my classroom and asked me, did I have a fork? I said, why? She said she wanted to eat her lasagna in the back of the classroom. I said, no, I don't have a fork. She left and went to the cafeteria to get a fork. I'm like, what just happened here? But I had to break it down, slow down a little bit. Said she probably just came from high school. This is college. I got to help her to see that we're not going to be eating in the back of the classroom. So I had to change my approach. Now, how I feel internally, I try not to show it externally. Like going, man, what just happened here? So I try to let the students see and show them that I really care about them. I'm trying to bring them up to a level where they can be able to, be not only work but do well in college and all above. So it's different. I've been working on that.
Okay.
This is like my second semester. So
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Gretchen, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I was just gonna bounce off of Calvin. What he was saying is like, and Calvin, I liked your ideas. Is I'll say if a student asks a question that I've already gone over, emailed or whatever, I'll then say, can anybody from the class explain to so and so what they're supposed to do, to make sure that the students also know, other students know, because sometimes I do think to myself, well, maybe if they're asking these questions, I didn't explain it well enough. And so by me asking this, hey, can somebody explain to so and so what the project was? And if that student can explain it to this student, then I feel okay. I did, like, they weren't listening or they missed, or whatever the case is, in that sense. And then there's this one other thing, and I don't know if it's okay to do or not, but this is what I've started doing with the online environment. Is because in Blackboard, you know how we can only see 4 people at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I now go through people's names, asking them questions, like I'll call them out. And if the person doesn't come and answer, like if I say, Sam, and he doesn't come on the first time I call him out, I'll wait about 10 minutes and then I'll ask for Sam to answer that question again. And if Sam doesn't answer the question a second time, I now am kicking them out of my class.
Got it.
And so, and the reason I'm doing that is that when I can go back to do the attendance for my virtual classes, I can see that Sam just came into the class and never really attended.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, whatever you need to do to be able to keep track of that, if you find that that's working, more power to you. Sometimes in the trainings that I've gone to, they've suggested against randomly calling on people, because students with like anxiety sometimes get very anxious and then don't want to come because they feel like maybe that they're going to get caught off guard on the spot and not know the answer. So what I've done to kind of adjust to that, because they actually talked about that in the classroom management training that I went to for this, is to encourage points for participation that are already built into the syllabus and built into the point structure. That way, when they come to class, they're motivated to participate. That way they get to participate on their own terms with maybe material that they feel confident on. And if they don't, and they just show up to class and they don't participate, then they don't get the same amount of points as someone who does. So if that's working for you, like I said, feel free to continue it. I just have learned like in different models, like, you know, sometimes like that level of like, you know, worry and like maybe being very focused on what they're.
I have that participation points built into my class as well. I believe
Awesome.
that Sam just literally comes to class, this is my fake person, but comes to class, puts their, like they're there, and then just goes and does something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that a lot of people are doing that, right? Turn it
Yeah,
on mute and then cut off their video, and then we have no idea what's happening.
exactly. Exactly.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else want to share? Is that you, Monroe? Are you raising your hand?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
I like the idea, when if I call on a student and the student doesn't respond, or the student responds, but it's not the right response, I don't say no, that's totally wrong. No, no. What I do is I kind of bounce around. I'll ask, oh, this is good. This is exactly what he said or she said, so that I make them feel, or try to make them feel comfortable. Because when you're being called on and you're asked to be called, you're going to be called on, then there's a little bit of anxiety. So I try to uh, get rid of that or dismiss it as best I can, so they don't feel bad. Because I use other students to say, I like what she said a moment ago, even though she may not have had the right answer, or he might not have had the right answer. But let's go on. Let's talk about what happened here and so forth. So I usually like to bounce off and use positive reinforcement to kind of bounce off and tell a student, well, that's okay, that's all right, but let's move ahead.
Oh, awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that avoiding shaming in the classroom, and that's really important. It's very easy
Sure.
for us to end up doing it without even realizing it. So,
Yes.
you know, it's great that you have a more supportive environment where people don't feel like they're going to be attacked if they don't know the answer. So when it comes to consistency, like we're talking about in one request, if you want this to be effective and to get what you want 90% of the time, which is what they told me when I took this class, they said you will get what you, if you do everything, that you will get what you want 90% of the time on the first request. It just needs to be done all. I do not have any of those issues anymore. Like I said, if I deal with it, it's in the first week, but immediately the consequence is there. Immediately they get praise and points if they do what they need to do. Okay. Again, I'm not just consequencing, I'm also praising. And I tell teachers this all the time. I use this space all the time. They get a certain number of participation points every time they come. If they're late, they automatically lose 5 points right off the bat. Okay? And then if they don't participate or they're doing anything disruptive in class, then they lose another 5 points for doing that. So again, sometimes I have issues on the first week, maybe week 2 if maybe the student wasn't there for the first class and is just coming for the second one, because most of my classes meet once a week in the evening. Then that's usually how long that I have the issues. But if I am consistently having issues of repeating myself over and over and over, I always look at myself. What am I praising them when they're doing the right thing? Am I consequencing them when they're not doing the right thing? Okay? This is the same thing that we need to do all the time, right? If your kid doesn't do what they need to do, or they come home late and they break curfew, they immediately, right, get grounded. Or if you're at work and you're consistently showing up late, you're probably going to get talked to and then get written up. So there's no reason for us to not be doing those same things in the classroom, because this is what's going to happen in their job. Okay, so when we don't address these behaviors or try to correct poor choices, we're setting our students up for failure, because these behaviors they're practicing in the classroom, they're going to take to their job. If they're late for your class, they're probably late for their job. If they are disrupting and not paying attention in your class, they're probably doing that at work too. Okay? So as teachers, we're not just trying to get respect and a very positive flow in the classroom. We are preparing them for adulthood. So anytime we don't practice these behaviors or call them out, praise them when they're doing something well, consequence for choices, we're just setting them up for failure. So sometimes if you can think about it in a different light like that, maybe there can be a little bit more motivation to make sure that you're being consistent every time that something is going on that you're not happy with. So Gretchen was saying earlier how she does participation points in the class. I highly recommend that, because that's an area where you can praise and reduce, and they can see it immediately reflected in Blackboard right away. Okay, so that way, because if you try to consequence like 2 weeks later, as we all know, those consequences tend to be very ineffective because people can't see the connection between the choice and the consequence. Monroe, did you want to share something?
No.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So the final one that we're going to talk about is the argument, okay? You know that our students love to argue. You know they could make every excuse in the book. You know they have 15 family emergencies that come up 20 times in a week, which is why they don't have their work done, right? And it's very easy for us to take the bait and to start going back and forth. I told you that you weren't supposed to. You've asked me this a million times. You're asking for an extension when you have not done anything that you needed to do ahead of time. Now you're asking for this. It's really important that we catch ourselves in this, okay? Like I was saying, that poor interaction I had with a student the other day that I had to apologize for was because I took the bait, right? Like it was dangled in front of me, and instead of just reiterating the expectations and delivering the consequence for asking things that have already been said, I started to argue back and forth, and it was a complete waste of time, right? And if I hadn't gone back to apologize for my behavior, I may have damaged the relationship between the student and myself. Okay, so this is very easy to do. Have you guys been in a situation where you've gotten into an argument with a student, or you've taken the bait when they've dangled it in front of you?
I have very recently. I have a student who, no matter what, it's in my rhetoric class, he's in 102, and he's failed it twice before. And no matter what I teach, what I do on rough drafts or whatever, he will not take any of the comments. He will give me a rough draft. I'll make, 1,000 comments on how to fix it. He won't fix it. And then he will come back and say, well, I guess you just don't like anything I give you, do you? And there was one email I sent where I was like, I was kind of like, well, you need to follow the directions. I don't know how many more times I could do this. And then he sent one back, and then I said, well, I always give you the opportunity for rough drafts. Perhaps next time, maybe you could make those corrections. I'm here for you to get the best grades, but I still sent that first email out. That was the problem. I should have just stopped it there, which is actually a question I have for you. How do you disengage it after that first email or that first comment?
So usually what I say is, if they've asked me something, I've already put out the expectations. Right. I say, this is the answer, and as a result, as we talked about and I've listed in your syllabus, because this has already been outlined in 3 different places, you will see a 10-point deduction reflected right on Blackboard. So when they see that, the conversation usually stops, because they know if they continue to engage, that they've already got a point deduction for asking something that I've already put out there. So I haven't had students continue to come back on that. They continue to come back when I haven't given a consequence, and I'm just dilly-dallying in conversation.
Yeah. This particular individual does do that, but I got to the point now in the last essay where I just sent the one email, and then after his other email, I just didn't respond to it because there's really nothing to say at that point. He technically failed my course because of it. So there was nothing else I could do for him. I let him know, and I told him to see a counselor, and that's kind of all I can do. So I just didn't engage anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, disengaging is sometimes the best tool that you can use, right? Because not responding is a response in itself, right?
Okay.
So my students on the first day, that it's the same thing. If they were in face-to-face with me arguing back and forth, I'm going to disengage from the conversation. If they're doing it in email, I'm going to disengage from that conversation too. So I tell them on the first day, because I'm very clear on the expectation at the beginning, this is not me ignoring you. This is not me trying to punish you or shame you. I'm disengaging because the conversation is no longer productive.
Okay, thank you.
So they know ahead of time. Again, one thing I've learned out of taking these classroom management courses, which they told us a million times in training, is that beginning of class and the first day and all that kind of stuff is so important, because when you lay everything out there, those expectations have already been put out, so it's not a surprise. No one should feel like they're being singled out and being treated differently, because this information was put out to everyone, and it was very clear. Like I used to, when I first became a teacher, I would kind of blow off the syllabus, I would just be like, here's the syllabus, you guys are adults, you guys can read it, let me know if you have any questions. And then I would just jump into chapter 1. Ever since I did this, I do not do that at all. I will spend an hour and a half for the first class talking just about expectations, and letting them answer questions, testing them on their knowledge, showing where that is, testing again, and putting it out there. So that way I don't deal with all the wasting time that happens at 5 to 9 hours every single week for the rest of the semester, because I'm not going to do it. So a lot of this, like I was saying, but with me being a therapist, is that we have to teach our parents a lot of times like this when they have a kid who's maybe oppositional, or they have a adult child who's using drugs or anything else like that, how to not continuously engage in negative ways, get into arguments that are non-functional. Like we have a lot of parents that will like argue like nonstop when their 21-year-old comes home wasted, drunk. Like there's nothing productive that happens out of that. Like they're intoxicated. You're not going to have a productive conversation. So the ability to disengage and to revisit at a time when it's actually going to be productive is just a really important skill to have. And to even seeing if it's even worth, re-engaging in that conversation. So finally, we're just going to continue about the no arguments. And that is different ways of delivering a message, right? Instead of saying your lateness is disrupting class, which is really what I used to say before I got trained in this, I would be like, you're being disruptive. It's not fair to the other students. You're being distracting. What can I do to help you get to class on time? I mean, one time I said this and I pulled a student after class instead of continuously taking points away, and didn't know how to get to class on time. And we went through the bus schedule and we figured it out, and we solved the problem together, and we built a relationship, okay? Is there something I can help you do to focus in class, as opposed to pay attention and stop fooling around when I'm talking to you? Again, your lateness is disrupting class and pay attention and stop fooling around. This is the real me, right? This is the things that I want to say. Instead of saying it that way, I say it in a way where I can ask a question. Or what can I do to help you? Is there something that can be done? Like, is something distracting you that's taking your attention away? And then one thing I say to my students all the time, and I say this to my staff too, is that I want you to be successful. Your success is important to me. And on the very first day when I teach those expectations, or anytime I deliver a consequence, I say that my last line at the very end of the email or when I'm engaging is, I'm trying to teach you how to have positive behavior so you can be successful in your future careers. Because if I don't teach you this now, you're going to go to work and you're going to be texting in the middle of a meeting, and you're going to get written up and you're going to get fired, because that's going to be seen as disrespectful. Like, I tell my social work students all the time, I teach graduate course at Aurora University, and when they're sitting on their phone texting, I was like, are you going to do that when you're in therapy with your client? Are you going to be taking phone calls and texting? Because they're going to fire you and you're not going to have a caseload, and you're going to end up having to find a different career, because that's just the matter. That's just what it is. Like, when you're in front of someone, you need to be giving them your undivided attention. Otherwise, there's consequences, and I'm just trying to teach you the behaviors that are going to make you be successful in your future career. Okay? So this line, I want you to be successful, that I put into quotes, is typically at the end of a lot of the sentences or a lot of the emails that I send out to my students. So that way they know where my motivation comes from, and they don't fall into the, well, she's just mean and she's just trying to punish me and I'm just a victim of circumstances. What questions do you guys have? No questions? All right, cool. Then we'll just quickly do the recap, because we're coming up on the end of the hour. One thing I just want you to remember, just as a real quick, is rewarding these small achievements when people are doing right, when they've done really well, because then when you're rewarding it, they start to believe in themselves, they start to build their confidence, and then they can be successful. Okay, so remember, not just pointing out when they're doing something wrong, but when they are doing something well, when they do like a really great job in a paper, when they share something in class that's really insightful. I always think, wow, that's amazing. That's really important. Like, I never thought about it that way. You know what I mean? And I always let students know that I learn just as much from them as they are probably learning from me. And everything that they have to share is important, and I want them to be heard. Okay, so anytime you have an opportunity to use any sort of encouragement and praise, it really helps with building those student-teacher relationships and supporting unconditional positive regard. Okay, so just a quick recap. Remember, all this time that we're wasting in the classroom, we can get that back. Okay, and what I tell my students is, if you do what you need to do, the amount of extra time that I have, I'm going to put back into your material. I'm going to find cooler videos to incorporate. I'm going to make even more fun assignments. I'm going to create really fun debates if I have the time to do it. If I'm spending all my time like going back and forth with you, there's not going to be time for all of that. So if you want the best me and the most creative stuff, then you do what you need to do, and I'll do what I need to do. Okay? Unconditional positive regard, that's around the base of just accepting students as good people with good intentions. So sometimes I have to remind myself this when, you know, during frustrating times or when someone's not following directions, and just reminding them that they are not defined by their behavior. And finally, it's the clear expectations. Make sure everything is outlined so they understand it. Put it in multiple areas. You create a cheat sheet for them that you ask things one time. Anytime you ask it twice, that's a choice. There should be a consequence associated with that. Again, if you're consequencing, that means you also need to be praising in a different way. The more consistent you are, the less you're going to deal with these behaviors. And finally, it's really the, you know, let's avoid these arguments and make sure that if we get to the place where we feel heated, you can just say, listen, what you are sharing with me right now is important to me, and I want to be able to give you my undivided attention, but I'm not able to do that right now. How about we talk tomorrow? I have 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. where I can give you my undivided attention. Which time works best for you? Okay? That's what I do if I'm not like maybe in a good emotional place, or maybe I didn't have a good session with a client, and maybe a student is approaching me when I'm not in a good emotional place. That's the kind of stuff that I say, so that way they get validated that what they have to say is important, but maybe I'm not in a good place to have the conversation now, so we can have it on a different day or time. Does anyone have any questions or any feedback?
This was really awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the feedback. And like I said, you guys are more than welcome. Like, you guys can email me anytime. Like, I'm happy to. You guys can text me, whatever. Like, I'm happy to help anytime. So just feel free to reach out. You are not bothering me. Like, anything I can do to help you get that time back in the classroom, I'm happy to do. Okay. Monroe?
Thank you for these suggestions. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to use it. I'm going to be using these points. And
Okay.
Again, I just want to thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Monroe. I really appreciate that feedback. And thank you, Shelley, for inviting me and participating and being present. So I'm going to close out now. So you guys have a great rest of the day, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye, Sabrina. Bye, Shelley.
Thanks, Sabrina.